Different interlocal meetings, I believe now. The idea that we're doing a new transportation plan. Is it time that we ought to start to think about or consider a transit system in Wasatch County? Or is it still too early in Wasatch County's development in terms of offering that type of service? One thing I came across this last week was the service that Park City is offering to Camas now. And I got some interesting data on that from Caroline Rodriguez, their transportation planner over there. Thought I'd share it with you. So they have a new line that started in November of 17, and it runs from the Park City Transit Center as well as the Kimball's Junction over to Camas and back. Here's a little information flyer on it. They're basically saying new transit service from Park City to Camas. I think they have a little Wi-Fi thing on there as well to try to make it sound like it would be a fun thing to do. You'd be on your phone or whatever. Camas is a commuter route. They have two different routes. They call it the number 11 and the number 12. I won't get into much of the detail, but both of them start at the in Camas at the Volker Bakery there. There's a park and ride lot there across from the food town. And so there's a nice little parking area there. And then they do trips in the morning and trips in the afternoon. And right now they're getting about 73 boardings a day. So it's about 73 people on average per day since November. These are weekdays and boardings.
So is that 30 some odd twice, or is that 70 people?
That is 73 times people get on that bus, whether they're coming or going back and forth. So if it's work transit, it'd be half that many people. Yes, if you did it both ways, it would be the person would have rode it twice. That's right. And in the Camas Valley, they have about a 7,000 population right now. To put that in context, I think right now we've got, about 30,000 we just saw, 30,000 population in Heber Valley. So if you said that they're getting about 73 boardings a day and we have about 30,000 pop, we may get somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 boardings a day, if you follow my math. So I'm just basically saying we're 4 times bigger than Camas Valley is. 4 times 73 is 292 potential boardings a day if we were to have a transit system.
Wouldn't it be more relevant how many's in Heber? I doubt.
It could be.
I doubt people in Francis are walking to Camas to take the bus.
I don't think they're walking either in Camas. It looks like what they're doing is most of them are taking a car to being dropped off is what I suspect is happening, but good point.
Did we have any data before the bus started to know how many people were commuting outside of Camas Valley daily to Park City?
We do have some good census data, some census tools we can use to say how many people are coming from Camas Valley into Park City. We can look at that, and we can also see it in Wasatch County as well. In fact, Doug pulled those charts up at our interlocal meeting a couple meetings ago, and it was we were looking at it for the affordable housing study is what the topic was. So we have good data on that.
Part of the interim census I worked for almost 2 years, and we would ask, do you work out of town? How many miles do you commute? I mean, there's a lot of data if you can dig into it. It's incredible.
Yeah. So I asked myself, what does 300 trips a day mean? Or what does 70 trips a day mean? So I put it in context with what's happening in Utah County. The number on the very right is the boardings per day. The number on the left is the UTA route number. So route number 850, UTA route number 850 gets 2,429 boardings a day. That's going to be the new bus rapid transit system that's under construction today. If you go into Provo Norm, that's a big project for us. But if you look down at the bottom, they've got a couple routes that are only doing, 3 is probably, hopefully that's not the bus driver getting on and off. 36 and 82, and so they've got some lower numbered routes as well, 90, 98, 122, 135. So if we did, let's say you did 3 routes in Heber Valley, one over to Park City, one down to Provo, maybe do a circulator going around Heber, maybe you got 100 trips a day on each one of those routes potentially. as something that would take care of it. And the way that I'm looking at transit in Wasatch County is not as a traffic problem solver. It's probably more of a social service program that you're considering. You know, getting people to the city or down to Provo to do some medical visits or whatever it might be. So anyway, just wanted to give you some thoughts on that. Yes, Kendall?
I guess our resistance, or has been
Yeah.
somewhat between here and Park Cities, we aren't particularly interested in providing the bedroom community for all of the employment, for Park Cities employment that can't afford to live there. But they could, if it was easier for them. And
I agree.
that's where we've resisted.
I heard that loud and clear, and I wanted to make sure that we stated that how Mike Davis talked about it is we should be looking at a transit system to serve Wasatch County,
Yeah.
not at a transit system that serves other counties or other places. So what would be best for Wasatch County? And that's what the study that we proposed would do at our last interlocal meeting, was based on what is the best transit service for Wasatch County and Heber Valley. And I think we put together a $50,000 budget. I talked to this group about anyone that might be interested in participating in that. I think we got some interest from Heber City. I talked to Midway, but Midway had some concerns about it, and we talked briefly, but haven't heard anything from Wasatch County. And just wanted to bring it up one more time for your discussion. If you don't want Mountainland to pursue the transit study, we won't bring it up again. Just wanted to let you know that we're just in a holding pattern until you guys make a decision. If you do want us to proceed, we'll proceed, put the money together. If you don't want us to do that, that's fine too.
So I have a
Mayor?
question. So if you had a bus that was leaving Heber City, going to Park City in the morning, assuming that we're trying to help the people who are commuting out of our valley, and then the reverse in the evening, I mean, wouldn't that be more catering, or do you have to have one going each way to be able, I mean, are there any rules about how that works?
I'm not a transit specialist, so
Okay.
I'm not going to try to
Okay.
predict how you would design that system. But we have heard that Park City, like Kendall has mentioned, has been very interested in sending service to Heber Valley.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, and so you could even picture that maybe Park City runs that red line, you know, out of their existing inventory or whatever. Let them run that service, and we run the yellow and blue service. Or maybe we have UTA run the blue service, and we run the yellow service in Heber Valley. Maybe it's a small van that you hop on or something, or you know, some hybrid thing that we haven't even thought of yet. So, great questions. How did you run? How would you run it? When would you run it? How often? What type of vehicle would you run it? Those are the type of questions you would answer in a transit study.
Shawn,
Yeah, Danny?
I think you were saying, you said that 300 boardings per day is more of a service to the community and not really for traffic alleviation.
That's right.
How many boardings do we have to reach before we're helping to alleviate traffic?
Okay, if you looked at Utah Transit Authority's 850 route and 830 route, those are in very tight corridors. 850 is the University Parkway. That comes down the BYU diagonal into Provo up to the Missionary Training Center. We don't have any more width to widen the road. So at that point, you start to ask yourself, how can I get more people through that corridor without adding capacity, because I can't add any more lanes of travel. So you start to say a bus might diminish or affect the traffic in a positive way. So you see right now we have 2,400 trips a day. Our opening day, Bus Rapid Transit, when it opens up in August 13 of this year, it'll run every 6 minutes. So you won't have to have a schedule. You walk out, the bus comes, you get on it, and you go.
How many stops along that route?
There are about, Matt, would you know, I think there's about 14 stops. It goes all the way from the Provo Front Runner Station, the train station, up around the east side of BYU, down the Parkway, past University Mall, all the way over to the Orem Front Runner Intermodal Station. So it connects those two Front Runner stations together. And we're predicting that thing will have 12,000 riders on opening day. So we'll go from 2,000 to 12,000. That's the kind of traffic relief that we're talking about when you start a really impressive big project. But that's a $200 million project too, so it's a big project.
That's retail.
Well, that's an interesting piece of it is that BYU and UVU have made this free for their students. And now we're proposing to add another $2 million to the pool to make it free for everyone in Provo and Orem. So anyone can ride that BRT system for 3 years as a pilot program to see if we can get people out of the cars and onto that bus system.
Isn't that what Cache County did with theirs?
Yep, Cache is free, Park City is free. I'm not sure about St. George Transit, but free systems are kind of being talked about more and more right now because people are realizing that it's a sunk cost. We've already paid for it. Put people on that bus, get them out of the car. So it's a debate that's going on.
Shawn, you say you're on a holding matter. What do you need to hear from them?
We need to hear from the Wasatch County Council that you want Mountainland to put together a funding scenario to fund this study. I've got a couple different funding sources that I could consider pursuing. UDOT's Rural Transit Program, I think I could get some money from them. I think there ought to be a little bit of money in it from Wasatch County. I think there ought to be a little bit of money in it from Heber City, and I think there ought to be a little bit in there from Midway to get skin in the game so you guys are concerned about how this thing turns out and have some vested interest in that. I don't think the smaller towns like Charleston or Interlocal, should participate, but it could be token amounts even from Wasatch County and Heber City and Midway. And that's all I got tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, thank you. That was very informative. All right, our next item on the agenda is number 3. It's the discussion of school resource officers and police in schools. And we have our sheriff and our police chief here. I don't know who's... Are we just discussing or do we have...
My understanding this was a discussion.
Okay. Discuss on, Pete.
Well, item 4 was the report that we got.
Yeah, item 4, it talks about the report on the plans. Maybe we ought to just do that first and then we can discuss the specifics of...
They kind of combine them together even.
Yeah, let's do that. So why don't we hear the report first on the plans and contracts between Heber, Wasatch County, and the school district, Sharon?
Don't be so bad. I'm far from that. The plan. I think as everyone knows, Heber City or Wasatch High School several months back had several, I think it was 3, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Booth, 3 different incidences where a threat had been made one way or another involving firearms. Serious threats, if you will, where students, juveniles were taken into custody, placed in a detention center because of the threats that had been made. Because of those threats, the school district, the school board, met with the sheriff's office, Heber City Police Department, and asked for officers to go into the school. We had already had officers placed in the high school for the most part since probably 1982, right in that time frame. The superintendent had asked that because of the national statistics of the growth in schools, that 1 officer per every 1,000 students is the rate right now that they're asking at least 1 officer. So Heber City kicked in or had another officer hired to help us out at the high school. When all this took place, the threats, the school board had asked the superintendent to sit down with Chief Booth and I and come up with a plan of maybe putting an officer in every school. There was a lot discussed, still being discussed, but we are to the point where I believe the council, both councils, Wasatch County and Heber City's council, are ready to sign the contracts with the school board, school district. For Wasatch County, we are going to be putting an officer in every school that is in the county, within the county jurisdiction. That would be Midway, Daniel Canyon School, elementary school. Midway's is an elementary school. We have an officer going into the Timpanogos Middle School and the Old Mill Elementary School. We already have one in the high school. Heber City will be worrying about the ones that's within the city limits. So Wasatch County has stepped up to the plate, I think, and has agreed to fund half of what it's going to cost to hire 4 new officers for the schools. The district is going to cover half, at least for the first year, and that means all of the equipment that that officer is going to require, the vehicle, and wage and benefit. I believe how it's broken down would be $360,000 apiece, I believe, at this point, what has been looked at. I believe Wasatch County is probably going to have to raise taxes. There are several other things that need to be looked at as far as the tax portion of it goes. Probably other discussions that will need to take place with Heber City to go along with that. The district, my understanding, the school district, the superintendent is wanting Wasatch County to start the contract July 1st of this year, and it will go through for at least 5 years. Now, this is just my opinion, it's not part of the plan. I do think that each year things will be looked at very closely. I think that the school district, the school board, they've heard enough from the public that the schools will be getting hardened. What I mean by that is they'll be looking at fencing, bulletproof glass, entryways will be hardened. And eventually, I think that will be the major priority, even over the officers at this point. At least that's how I'm kind of thinking. Other than that, I can't answer what the plan is exactly for Heber City. Chief Booth would have to speak to that. I do think that the school board is very adamant, at least right now, with the plan that they do want an officer in every school. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, will you come up and share Heber City's perspective?
So the sheriff did a good job outlining what we're looking at with the schools. 2 years ago, Heber City obtained a grant from the federal government which allowed us to place a school resource officer within the Rocky Mountain Middle School. That's the first school resource officer that we've had in the schools that I'm aware of. Sheriff, unless you're aware of anything different in the past.
Just their officers in that.
Right, right. So at least from Heber City's end, that was the first officer that I'm aware of. And that was an agreement entered in between the school district, contributed funds, the grant contributed funds, and then the Heber City contributed funds to that. That grant comes to an end, I believe, next year, next school year is when it was a 3-year grant from the federal government. So what we went into this with is the county had an SRO, a school resource officer at the high school. We put through the grant a school resource officer in the Rocky Mountain Middle School. As the sheriff talked about discussions this year with the events that had been occurring, the sheriff's office, the school district, the police department felt it was in everyone's best interest to put a school resource officer in Timpanogos Middle School, which lies in the county, as well as a second school resource officer into the high school. So we have a Wasatch County Deputy School Resource Officer in the high school, as well as a Heber City Police Officer, School Resource Officer in the high school, which makes sense. And then we have a Rocky Mountain Middle School school resource officer, which makes sense because our student population at the high school is about 2,000. So that's an officer per 1,000 within the high school, having the 2 there. And then each of the middle schools sit at about almost 1,000, a little under 1,000 each. Where the plan differs a little bit is looking at the elementary schools. The sheriff's office is looking at having a dedicated officer in each of the elementary schools. What Heber City has requested from the school district and what we would like to look at is having a Heber City officer in each of our elementary schools, which there's 2 of them. There's J.R. Smith, there's Heber Valley Elementary, but we're looking to fund that 100% funded by the school district on a part-time basis, that the officers come in on their time off to cover those schools, which the school district at this point has not been happy with our proposal. And I think that's where they're coming towards the county, asking the county if they would consider doing something different. I believe the school district's concern is seeing a different officer from Heber City every day in the schools, where the county's plan has the same officer in the elementary schools every day. So having a part-time officer in our elementary schools doesn't cost our city anything, and the school district funds that at a lesser rate than having a full-time officer in there.
I wonder if I could ask, have there been any studies that have been referenced? I'm hearing some compelling reasons why we don't need to have full-time officers in elementary schools in particular. And I'm just wondering, nationwide, have we looked at what other areas are doing, why the school district feels strongly about that? And I'm just curious, I'm just wondering if studies have, if there's been information you've been able to use.
So I'm not aware of school resource officers within elementary schools. I'm aware of school districts. For example, I was a school resource officer early in my career in the Park City School District. And as a school resource officer for the Park City School District, I had a high school, an alternative school, a middle school, and an elementary school. The majority of my time was spent at the high school. Next was the middle school. Rarely was I in the elementary school. I talk simply from my point of view as a law enforcement officer. Understanding crime simply is that children aren't culpable of committing crime until they're 14 years of age. That's state law that looks at that. So our SROs stay busy in the high school, they stay busy in the middle school because there's problems there and the kids are culpable of committing crime there. They're bringing drugs into our school, they're bringing weapons into our school, they're engaging in fights in our school, they get in accidents in the parking lot in our schools because they can drive in the high school. So our officers stay busy there. My worry from the city's end, and I just speak from the city's end, my worry is there's not crime that can be committed in the elementary schools by kids there. There is crime that occurs at the elementary schools. For example, within the last couple of months, we've arrested 2 registered sex offenders that have been at our elementary schools. So it's good to have an officer there in the event that you get an adult coming in and preying upon your children. We deal with custody disputes at elementary schools, where one half of the parental party will come in and try and check their kids out or try and take their kids from school, and maybe there's an order there that says that they can't. So we get involved in situations like that. There are medical events that occur at schools, in elementary schools. You'll have kids that will fall and hurt themselves, or staff members that will injure themselves that will go and assist on. So to answer your question, no, there isn't anything I can point at. What I do believe, the answer to our schools is see something, say something. It's a campaign that's been pushed out through the schools. The Secret Service did a study on school shootings. 81% of your individuals who are involved in school shootings, being the suspect, the perpetrator, they tell someone before they do that. So the See Something, Say Something campaign is in my opinion, the most effective thing we can be doing. And it worked on the incidents that the sheriff referenced to. Those were all see something, say something, meaning the kids saw something or heard something that wasn't good, and they said something to the proper authorities, which we were able to come in and take swift and decisive action to ensure that our schools stay safe. The school district and law enforcement has to keep sending that message. Now, there's 19% left, right? 81 minus 100 is 19. 19% of your perpetrators going to the schools aren't going to tell anyone that they're going to schools. So second, to see something, say something is hardening the schools. Right now, our schools aren't hardened. Not all of them. And not any of them are hardened to the degree that they need to. To have an officer in the schools all of the time right now is necessary because our schools aren't hardened. Meaning the doors aren't locking in some of the schools. They're not set up to do so. The bullet-resistant, bulletproof glass hasn't been put in. The tinting hasn't been put in. The locking door mechanisms haven't put in. The list goes on and on and on what can be done to lock the schools. See something, say something is your most effective thing, in my opinion. Securing the schools and hardening the schools is what we're calling it, is really the second thing. Having an officer in the schools, I don't want the community or the school district to use that as a fallback, to say, yeah, but we have an officer in the schools. That really, for me, is third on the rung there. Right now, it's absolutely necessary. Moving into the future, once the schools are hardened, like the sheriff says, it can be addressed from year to year. I think we can potentially look at scaling that back, or we can look at ramping it up, depending on what we're seeing moving into the future. Does that answer your question?
To add to that, the reason throughout the country, every school district is doing something different. But in Wasatch County, when all this started happening, it was the public, the parents, that was demanding that, to the school board, that they want an officer in every school. We talked to them about the priority of hardening every school, and the elementaries being the priority. And I think it is, at least in my discussions with the school. However, you still have enough people, enough parents that feel like if you have an officer in the high school or you have an officer in the Timpanogos Middle School, and you do not have one in the elementary school, you're saying that their child is not as important. The school board has taken that to heart, and they are very adamant until they get things in order with the hardening, they will have an officer there. And I don't blame them. It's kind of a hardship on us as law enforcement, but it's been very difficult.
Well, I agree with what you're saying and fully understand it. And I guess I look at the approximately $1.2 million that we're looking at, and that doesn't harden the schools, and that doesn't promote the see something, say something, which I think has been profoundly successful. And so I'm simply raising that as, perhaps there's an educational component here that would help parents understand what is successful, and that's why I ask: are there studies out there that can help explain that? And in the meantime, putting officers in school, I'm not trying to cause anything crazy here. I'm just thinking that that's,